constitutional burden and show that there's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The state failed to do that here. I don't believe they could have done that here, given the dearth of evidence and my client's innocence. And I also hope that they understand that when you get in there and you fight for people, regardless of what they're accused of, I don't care if it's murder, I don't care if it's racketeering, and honestly, if it's child molestation or some other incredibly heinous allegation, when you defend those people, you don't just protect those people's rights. You support the Constitution and you protect the rights of everybody else. It stops the police from doing unlawful searches and seizures of your home, and it keeps the government under control. And I think that a lot of people that may say, well, the jury got it wrong, these guys should have been convicted. I think if a lot of those people think about it, they would also want the state's feet to be held to the fire and for everyone's constitutional rights to be respected.
What do you think the legacy of this case will be?
That's a very difficult question because I'm torn between cynicism and hope. My hope would be that the state has learned, at least listening to what some of these jurors have said, that the use of artists, and we haven't talked about this, but the use of artists and rappers' artistic expression against them is, not only is it wrong, not only does it infringe upon their First Amendment rights, but it will not yield success in a lot of cases. And it didn't yield success in this case. So maybe they'll think twice before using lyrics against them. Maybe in future cases, they will be more considerate of the time of the citizens who get put on jury duty. Maybe they will understand that the resources of our justice system, including the DA's office and the sheriff's office and the judiciary, can be put to better uses than these massive racketeering charges. So I certainly hope that that is some of the legacy of this case, a more efficient system.
You said you're torn between a more optimistic and a more cynical answer to that question. You gave the optimistic version.
Yeah.
What's the cynical one that you're wrestling with?
Nothing changes. You know, I would hope that's not the case. I would hope that lyrics aren't used against people anymore. But given the amount of times that lyrics are used against people of color, and by the way, they're only used against people of color, the number of times lyrics are used, I don't know that it's going to go away. Georgia's RICO law needs serious reform, especially the conspiracy portion of the RICO statute. So my cynical answer is that's not going to be reformed or changed. It's very rare that you don't win re-election by reforming the criminal justice system, by reforming bond, by reforming bail, by pulling back on statutes. So, and the DA's office, maybe they won't change it all too.
You mentioned the use of rap lyrics as evidence in a prosecution. You have been vocal in your opposition of that. You've argued that it violates First Amendment protections of speech. There are also going to be those who see it from the other side and who feel as though these are written expressions of real life. Sometimes, oftentimes in music, they're presented as real life. So somebody might say, well, why not use them as evidence? This is like a confession.
Yeah, and I believe that in her press conference after the indictment and the arrest, Madam DA Fani Willis said, if you are going to confess over a beat, I'm going to use that against you. I'm paraphrasing. But the reality is that assumes that people that rap and people of color have no creativity, are not intelligent enough to make up things, make up stories. No one accuses Bob Dylan of inhabiting every character that he creates. It also ignores the fact that the record labels, the music industry, this is what sells. Now, think of that what you will. That's an entirely different issue. But the labels want this, and so there's a demand, and so people create this type of music. But to say that that is necessarily confessional, I find to be tremendously offensive. So if you want to use that against people in trial, I believe that you have to show some kind of a nexus, some connection between the lyrics specifically and the alleged crime. And it's certainly against Diamante Kendrick. They did not, who goes by Yak Gotti. They didn't show any connection between the lyrics that he would rap and the crimes that they were charging him with. Yet they still wanted to use his lyrics against him.
So it sounds like what you're advocating for isn't a blanket ban on the use of lyrics as evidence, but rather a hemming in of when they can be used. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And if you look at the RAP Act, that's in Congress and hopefully one day in Georgia, it doesn't ban the use of lyrics. It doesn't ban the use of artistic expression. But what it does is it raises the bar before they can be brought in and used against people in court. And that's all I'm asking for.
And the RAP Act was introduced by Georgia Representative Hank Johnson.
It
correct?
was. He was one of the co-sponsors of that act.
And that has now passed. It has become law.
It has not passed. And I don't believe it's even made it out of committee. And of course, when this Congress ends, it will have to be reintroduced in the next Congress. And so what I'm hoping to do is use the small platform in my 15 minutes of semi-fame to try to push for that. And I'm going to continue to advocate for passage of the RAP Act.
This was not the only major RICO case in Atlanta this year. The YSL case was part of, in some ways, a twin-track major RICO case path through the Fulton County justice system. The other component of that was the ongoing election interference case against now President-elect Donald Trump and a number of co-defendants. How do you think the YSL case and its ultimate outcome will potentially impact that other major RICO case here?
You know, I don't know that we'll have any direct impact or maybe even indirect impact on that case. That case is on such a different track with such a different situation, especially because that case is likely to go away now that President-elect Trump is going to become president. So I expect that case to fizzle away. But what it does show, again, is the breadth of the Georgia RICO Act. It's far broader than the federal act. And I mean, I used to explain to people that under Georgia RICO conspiracy law, if you were to get on Facebook and you were to say, I completely support what President Trump did, this election was stolen, his seeking the 12,000 votes was all totally legitimate, that's an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy, and you could possibly be named in a Georgia RICO conspiracy indictment.
If you can prove some other predicate acts too.
But the predicate acts, if we're going to get detailed, those predicate acts do not need to be committed by that person that was charged. So for example, let's look at Diamante Kendrick. They did not, the state, to prove RICO conspiracy, does not have to show that Diamante Kendrick did any of the predicate acts. As a matter of fact, they don't have to show that he did any of the overt acts. All they have to show is that there was a conspiracy and that he willingly and knowingly joined it. So, to get someone, back to the President Trump analogy, to get someone for that, you would just have to show that there was a conspiracy involving President-elect Trump and that you willingly and knowingly joined it. And that is, honestly, a very easy thing to show.
You seem like somebody who thinks Georgia's RICO Act is, as it's constituted right now, way too broad.
That's correct. You picked that up.
Casts way too wide a net, in your view.
It does.
I want to land this conversation here. We're talking about Georgia's RICO Act. You've seen the inside of a history-making, in some ways precedent-setting, RICO case here in Georgia. You seem like somebody who is frustrated by the way this case was handled, by how long it took, and by how many resources it took to get it to a verdict. Is that accurate?
That's completely accurate.
Who's responsible for that?
Ultimately, it is the responsibility of the judge that managed this case, as well as the DA's office. Basically, you have a judge that did not put any type of a check, until Judge Whitaker. Judge Whitaker's done a great job. But until Judge Whitaker came aboard, you have a judge that was not willing to put any type of efficient management on the case.
You're talking about Judge Glanville.
I'm talking about Chief Judge Glanville, who we had 28 defendants, refused to sever it out into manageable chunks, which is, by the way, what would have happened in a federal case. They would never try 28 people. They would sever that out. So he refused to sever the cases out. He didn't put any type of a clock or any type of time management on the state. And then the state, who, thinking that would be helpful to them, just took it and ran with it. So I think it was a combination of the two. Was the defense at all to blame? I'm just going to say no, because I repeatedly, and not just me, filed motions to try to move this case along, to try to put some efficiency there, to try to sever defendants out and make it more manageable, all of which were denied. So I will not take blame for that. I think it's fully on a situation where you have a judge and a DA working hand in hand to reach what eventually was a just outcome, but not because of the actions of either of those parties.
I asked you this earlier, but I want to end with asking you it again following that answer. Do you think anything will change?
Boy, no.
Why?
I don't see much change over my lifetime. I would like for things to change. Do I think the DA's office is going to change? Do I think they're going to stop using RICO? No. It is too powerful a tool as it's currently written under the hands of the DA's office. And I'm involved in RICO cases. There are RICO cases all over the state. And what happens is, because that law is so strong, they're able to force people to plead out, and they're able to put people away in prison. So I don't expect any DA's office to change. Will we have another case that's a year long? I don't think so. So that part we probably will see change. Will there be another jury selection that takes 10 months? I don't think so. So for example, in this case with Judge Whitaker taking over, she was going to insist on a 90-day case. So maybe I'm being too cynical. Maybe some things will change. Will the things that really go directly to the lives of people and the use of RICO as this ridiculously powerful tool change? That I don't think so.